Liverpool didn't sack Arne Slot because results were bad. They sabotaged him on purpose, withholding transfers because they'd already secretly agreed a deal with Andoni Iraola months earlier. And here's the brutal truth Liverpool fans refused to hear. The window Iraola needs to steal a title was already used up by the manager they just sacked. And now Arsenal have matured and City are rebuilding. So you've traded a possession system that actually won you the league for a heavy metal manager with zero European experience and a squad built for entirely the wrong style of football. It's just that Liverpool's Champions League final is grabbing everyone's focus right now. So Arne Slot has been sacked, right? The people who predicted he'd be sacked are now asking whether he might have resigned instead. So let me explain why I predicted a sacking, and I'll walk you through the timeline. Now, Liverpool had just completed their end-of-season review, and I assumed the board would tell Arne Slot, this is a problem caused by our transfer department failing to bring in the right winger in winter, so we're not blaming you. We'll continue to back you going forward. Not Arne Slot, be our scapegoat first, but we'll support you behind the scenes. That's what I assumed was happening. But looking at it now, what I assumed was wrong. The reality is that it had already been decided long ago. They had already made up their minds they didn't want him, didn't want Arne Slot, which is precisely why they didn't bring in players according to his plan in winter. Of course, because they'd already decided it wasn't going to be him coaching, so they weren't going to follow his directives in the transfer market. So they didn't buy, and of course results couldn't improve, and it got even worse on top of that. Arne Slot. So why? They'd already decided they didn't want him long ago, and the reason is very likely because Liverpool had already found a replacement they believed in, right? At that point, Liverpool fans all assumed it must be Xabi Alonso or Lano. But as it turns out, no, that data was completely available at the time. But it's not Xabi Alonso or Lano, it's Andoni Iraola. And that actually makes one thing even clearer. It means they want to completely reverse and move away from the entire Jurgen Klopp approach. Why does this reasoning hold up? Because Andoni Iraola had already said very early on that he would not be coaching AFC Bournemouth next season, which means he had already quietly agreed with Liverpool behind the scenes, very early on, to take over from Arne Slot at the end of the season. It's just that Liverpool said nothing about it, kept saying nothing, kept pretending to be supportive, and then in the end, Arne Slot had to be sacked. Because if you want everything to be under your control, you have to sack him. You can't wait for him to resign on his own. You can't coax him into resigning. You resign, you leave. I have someone else, right? If you want the whole thing to stay entirely in your hands, you have to sack him. And then Andoni Iraola. This also means something, that after Arne Slot had coached for half a season, Liverpool's board had already decided they no longer wanted to continue playing this way. They didn't want to keep playing Arne Slot's system, they wanted to switch back to Jurgen Klopp's system. Andoni Iraola is clearly of the Jurgen Klopp school. And his strengths as a new manager are of course his familiarity with the physicality of the Premier League, and also his experience working with young players. AFC Bournemouth sold all their stars, and yet he showed real vision, finding young talent and coaching them up effectively. And Andoni Iraola has absolutely no experience in that regard. First of all, he has no experience managing a strong club, and in his coaching career, he has no experience in European football. He has never managed a side in European competition, never handled a multi-front campaign. That's precisely why he could be so heavy metal, right? In reality, this is quite similar to the situation at Spurs when they appointed Thomas Frank at the start of the season. The reason Thomas Frank could be so heavy metal so quickly at Brentford is the same. Single front, domestic only manager. And of course, Andoni Iraola's setup is more compact than Thomas Frank's. It's not going to be as simple as just hoofing the ball long. But at the core, they're both high tempo, both want it fast, both heavy metal, and neither is necessarily a championship winning formula. Because with AFC Bournemouth, like watching their matches recently, it's not necessarily a championship-winning formula either. That style of pushing both fullbacks forward along one flank and running quick attacks that way. Andoni Iraola is a friend of Mikel Arteta, but that doesn't mean he'll embrace a slow, patient possession concept. Perhaps he's somewhat like Michael Carrick, not a thorough possession and control coach, leaning toward a quicker style. But he may not have Michael Carrick's precision, tactical deployments, and he doesn't have Michael Carrick's championship-winning formula either. So in reality, he's an earlier stage, less experienced version of the Klopp type. Pure heavy metal and pace. And this is what Liverpool fans have always been intoxicated by. They really love it, don't they? All right. After Arne Slot coached for a season and a half through to mid-season, many voices from Liverpool fans were saying the team should go back to heavy metal, should go back to playing Jurgen Klopp's way. In the end, it turns out the board wanted to satisfy Liverpool's fans all along. Liverpool at their core truly has no patience for, or rather, no appetite for, controlled possession football. Don't say patience, say no appetite for it. They love heavy metal, and this makes me understand even more clearly why Klopp left. Klopp clearly knew the future required gradually shifting toward possession football, but he also clearly knew the fans didn't like it. Liverpool fans don't like that kind of thing, so he'd rather not coach it. Why spend his final years being cursed at by you lot? So now, if you switch back to a heavy metal manager, that likely means you'd have to replace the entire squad as well. First of all, Hugo Ekitike. Could he be a mismatch? Florian Wirtz almost certainly would be. Ryan Gravenberch might not fit either, which explains why no one was signed in the winter window, because very likely you can no longer buy the kind of players suited to Arne Slot. A whole different set of players may be needed. You'd need to buy those fullbacks who can bomb up and down the flanks, right? Now, Liverpool fans might well say this. Jurgen Klopp played pure heavy metal football and still won the Premier League, didn't he? Well, I have to say, Klopp only won it once. And at that time, the main competition was only Manchester City. No one else had got there yet. No one else was competing at that level. Only Liverpool could go toe-to-toe with them. But you still only managed to win it once. And even then, you needed Manchester City to slip up and hand it to you, right? But now the main rivals competing for the Premier League title, already number 2, one called Manchester City, the other called Arsenal. So you're going to wait for both of those teams to fall apart at the same time before you can sneak a result. Because you're heavy metal. Heavy metal means fighting on multiple fronts. And that means you'll definitely suffer an injury crisis at some point in the season. This manager has no experience of competing on multiple fronts, no rotation experience, no experience of multi-front campaigns. That makes it even more of a problem. So to actually succeed, to steal a result, well, that window to steal a result has actually already been used up by Arne Slot. Now Arsenal have matured, Manchester City are renewing and rebuilding, and their starting point is ahead of Liverpool's. Liverpool, meanwhile, is potentially starting over again. Their own renewal and rebuild has to begin from scratch. So right now the chance to steal a result hasn't come around yet. You could even say that window to steal a result is nowhere near on the horizon. So with that, I'll just wish Liverpool fans well. As long as you're happy, that's what matters. This is no longer my business. How you walk this road is for you to decide yourselves. If you found this breakdown useful and you enjoy this kind of in-depth analysis, a like and a subscribe goes a long way in keeping this channel going and motivating me to keep producing more. Drop a comment below too. I read every single one. See you in the next one.